Marietje, what is your action in favor of the Arab Spring at the European Parliament?
We've been involved with supporting human rights, democracy, self-determination and freedoms in the Arab world, also from way before the revolutions and the turnarounds broke out. And we continue to support the people and their desire to create their own lives and their own destinies. But it does require a completely different EU policy, because for too long the EU has actually focused on its interests more than on its values. And now we have a unique momentum to make those two more closely aligned. And the new vision for an EU neighbourhood policy is currently being shaped. And the main concept of this new neighbourhood policy is shortly summarized by more for more, which means that more reforms in favor of more respect for human rights, more respect for democracy, more respect for minorities and better economic circumstances will be rewarded, as it were, or met in a partnership by the EU with opening up our markets.
You spoke at Butterfly Europe about the role of bloggers as an engine of the protest. What is their role now in building democracy?
Bloggers and anyone who has been brave enough to voice his or her opinion have been crucial in the turnarounds in North Africa and the Middle East, and they continue to be across the world, in fact. New media, access to internet, the emergence of new technologies and cell phones has helped a great deal in enhancing freedom of expression, but also access to information despite censorship. It has enabled the documentation of human rights violations, and it's made the world eyewitness. The other side of this is that it's meant that these repressive regimes have started to crack down on bloggers more aggressively and have considered a number of people who speak out on Facebook, on Twitter or on blogs as enemies. And it is important to acknowledge that new media as such are a double-edged sword with great opportunities but also threats for bloggers.
Egypt is voting this week. Can election restart the revolution?
The elections in Egypt will prove very crucial for the future of the country, and there are some worrying signs coming out of Egypt at the moment. It will be very important that the elections are actually free and fair, but regrettably the Egyptian authorities have not allowed international observers. And in Tunisia, where elections have already taken place as the first country which saw the turnarounds and then the first to organize elections, the government welcomed international observers, and the results have been considered a good reflection of the opinion of the people. And I can only wish that in Egypt it will be the same. At the moment we're speaking now, Egypt is at the beginning of a month-long election process, and I can only hope that they will be free and fair and that the people get what they deserve, better respect for their rights, more opportunities and more justice in that society.
In Morocco and Tunisia and possibly Egypt, democracy meant Islamism at the power. It is a sustainable, consistent in your opinion?
Well, we from Europe cannot tell the people in any country what they should vote. It is up to them, but therefore it's even more important that the framework within which they choose the leaders to represent them is actually free and fair and is democratic. We must keep in mind that democracy is more than just elections. It means democratic institutions, a separation of powers, good governance, the rule of law, respect for human rights. And so while elections are very important, the sustainability of democracy lies in a number of factors, and it will be up to the new leadership to prove itself in that sense.
EU and the Arab League pressures are isolating Damascus. Will it be enough to stop violence in Syria?
It's fundamentally important that the violence that the Syrian regime puts against its own people stops immediately. We have not seen such cruelty in a very long time, and it's a sign of despair. It's a sign of isolation and a regime that is unwilling to face the reality and to do its obligation first, which is to respect the fundamental rights of its citizens. Isolation, though, may even help the regime. I believe it's important to try to keep talking to the people involved, including, for example, the economic elites There are 200 families close to Assad. They support him politically, but also economically. And Europe, as the most important trade partner of Syria, can really give these people a choice. Do not support a murdering regime if you want to continue your business opportunities. And something else that we have to do in Europe, which is very important, is to stop the export of information and communication technologies to Syria. As we speak, there are Italian technology consultants in Damascus working on a monitoring system which would allow Assad to centrally look at all internet and mobile traffic. And that's of course very undesirable because it would make it easier to track individuals down, to arrest them, to take them out of their homes. And Europe cannot have any role or complacency in that, so there's a lot of work we can do in the EU.
Libyan people conquered their freedom through a war. Will it be the same for Syria?
War should never be the goal or the means for transition. It is really the last resort. In Libya, the international community offered a mandate for the defense of a no-fly zone. Gaddafi had announced that he would be merciless in killing the people in Benghazi. There was a clear front line to defend, and that made the whole situation in Libya quite unique. The concept of the responsibility to protect was invoked for the first time. In Syria, the situation on the ground is quite different. The opposition doesn't want to see any military intervention because they're quite afraid that there will be a civil war, and this is something we really have to consider. On the other hand, where there was a front line in Libya, in Syria there are different patches of resistance which are woven between cities and neighborhoods even, so it's very difficult to defend one front line. And more importantly, which makes it very difficult to act as quickly as we did in Libya, there is no mandate from the international community. I'm very sad about it, but both China and Russia are reluctant to support the UN Security Council. I can only hope that the Arab League's criticism of Syria will show Russia and China that their interests in having good relations with the Arab world would be served by also speaking out against the violence that Assad is bringing against his own people.
You have been recently in Turkey. Is its democracy a model for the Arab world? What is its role in the Arab Spring?
Turkey is a very important country for Europe, and it's becoming a more important player in the region. Economically, it's doing very well, and also it is ambitious in being a leader in that region. But that's not the only part of the story. And to speak of a model, I think, is a bit dangerous because every country is unique, the circumstances are very different, and it's hard to compare. But people need to be inspired, and it's good if they can find a point on the horizon and they can see that there can be a secular state, which is a democracy, but which does have a majority population that are Muslim. So I very well understand why people look to Turkey as inspiration. On the other hand, as a European and as a liberal, we look at Turkey more from the point of view of domestic policies because the Copenhagen criteria, the criteria that a new member state has to meet, are mostly about domestic policies. And when we look at Turkey today, even though there are some very positive developments, I'm also quite concerned about the fact that there are more journalists in prison in Turkey than there are in China, and that internet freedom, something I care deeply about, is under serious pressure in Turkey. So if Turkey wants to be an inspiration and a model for the people in North Africa and the Middle East, I hope it will also choose to be a real example which also respects the fundamental rights of its own people to begin with.
Thank you, Marietje, and thank you again. See you on BflyMED next week. Bye.